50 years ago, Suzuki Roshi said, "I think we have a very good spirit here in this Zendo. I'm rather amazed at the spirit, but the next question is how to extend this spirit to your everyday life." And over 50 years later, I think we have a very good spirit here in this Zendo, and I'm rather amazed at the spirit. But one of my practice questions right now is how to extend this spirit into my everyday life and your everyday life, and how to extend something which is essentially a ceremony of appreciation for your life into your life. One of the ways I've found it helpful to explore it is through something that Sojun Mel Weitzman said a couple of years ago when he was talking about the four aspects of practice. And he said they are zazen, study, work, and practice discussion. Zazen, study, work, and practice discussion. And I guess he was talking at a practice center, perhaps Green Gulch or San Francisco Zen Center. And he may have been talking about practice in retreats and Zen centers, but I'm not really that sure. But either way, it's interesting to map our own practice onto these four elements. I'll say them again: zazen, study, which we're doing tonight, work and practice discussion. So of those four, tonight I'm going to talk about something that's maybe one of the least talked about of those four, which is work. And I'm thinking of work as your everyday life, as Suzuki Roshi said in his praise of the Sangha. And if we focus first on retreats, if you've been on a residential or a non-residential retreat, you'll be aware that quite often people are given roles to perform. They're given work to do, assigned work. And quite often we have an opinion about the work that we've been assigned. And we're invited to work with that during our work. And sometimes there can be quite strong opinions that come up when we're asked to, for example, clean the toilets or to do something which we don't really enjoy, or work with somebody we may not particularly want to work with. So if we think about a residential retreat, which some of you have been on, everything is supporting us to extend the spirit of the Zendo into the other aspects of the life of the retreat. So we go from the Zendo to study, as we do in our online retreats, to work in the house, which we did in our last online retreat, to practice discussion. And in a residential retreat, usually everyone goes for practice discussion. You don't book. You're invited to go at a particular time to see Flint or another teacher to explore your life and your practice. One of the interesting things about that flow is how do we manage the transitions as we move from the Zendo out into the garden, to studying, to getting ready to work, to practice discussion. How much do we remember and forget? remember and forget, remember and forget. And what is it we're remembering and forgetting as the retreat um, goes on? There was once a monk who was invited to visit a school, and everyone prepared very carefully to receive him at a certain time. The children were all ready, and everything was clean, and it was perfect for the visit of the monk. But for some reason, he or she was late and apologized for their lateness and said, well, it's actually more interesting to see what happens during the transitions than when everything is really carefully prepared, because you learn more about the practice when there's an edge in what happens, there's a challenge in what happens. So in the years that I've been practicing the Tenzo role, the head cook role, how do we manage the transition from the Zendo to the kitchen? And one of the things that's really helpful, if we have an altar in the kitchen and we start each session with some verses and lighting the candle, so it creates a container which flows from the Zendo to the kitchen. But even then, we're remembering and forgetting all through the cooking session. We're remembering and forgetting about something about practice. And one of the um, most kind of striking ways I noticed this was when the kitchen was really quiet one day, and I'd asked someone to go and lay the table, which is next to the kitchen. And there was a lot of clattering, a lot of moving of furniture and scraping the floor. And it was really noticeable that somehow some forgetting had gone on in the particular context of this retreat. And the sincerity of the person to get the job done was indeed wonderful. But I suggested to them that they might experiment with seeing if they could make the minimum of noise whilst efficiently getting the table laid, so that when they laid each knife and fork and spoon and each placemat, there was a ceremony happening. It wasn't, I'm going to lay the table and then we'll have the ceremony of the meal. It was this is still the ceremony. This is still the discipline. And in a retreat, there are lots of ways to keep noticing that and supporting each other with a kind heart to remember something about the practice. And when we're in an online setting, and if your whole experience of Zen has been in an online setting, it can be difficult to realize that this practice is essentially a ceremony of appreciation for your life. And there are certain things you're asked to do with your body in a certain way. But of course, everybody does it differently. Suzuki once famously, someone famously once asked Suzuki Roshi, about that. And he said, well, it's only when I ask you all to do the same thing that I see you, because you all do it in your own unique way. But the orientation towards the practice is the same, to take care. So in an online setting, which we've had for 2 years now, and bearing in mind that we say that Zen is caught, not taught, is it possible to catch this practice through being online? And I think the answer is clearly yes, because I can see that many people have caught it who have never been in a Zendo with other people in person. So you can catch it, which is the good news. Um, Perhaps it's more easily caught when you are with other people, because in our online setting, there is a kind of minimal ceremony that happens. And that's why I was tempted to say that verse tonight, just to add something which created a little more ceremony around the talk. And when you're with each other in a room, you see each other from different angles. Um, you see things being done. You see people doing things. I read something yesterday from Karen Mazan Miller, a teacher I like very much, about her teacher, Mizumi Roshi. And she said, luckily for those of us with a wayward sense of direction, a retreat consists largely of following in the footsteps of the person who stands in front of you. You will know this if you've been on a retreat. I was mesmerized by Mizumi's sure, elegant footfall, silent beneath the swoosh of his black robe. He moved when he moved, like Kilimanjaro. I would have followed him anywhere. I guess you could say I did, although it led no farther than my own home. Once you admit you are lost, everything you see is a sign pointing home. So if we think about caught, not taught, there are certain points where we catch something. We don't know what it is, but it's often something embodied in the practice or in someone. And it might be really interesting to think, what are the times when you've caught this practice and then caught it again and then caught it again? The answer to Suzuki Roshi's question, how to extend this spirit to everyday life, relates to what I've been talking about, the ceremony. So the next line is, you do it by respecting things and respecting each other, because when we respect things, we will find their true life. So there's the practice. You do it by respecting things. You extend your practice by respecting things. He wrote, this morning, when we were bowing in the Zendo, we heard a big noise overhead, because upstairs in the dining room, people were pushing chairs across the tile floor without picking them up. This is not the way to treat chairs, not only because it may disturb the people who are bowing in the Zendo underneath, but also because fundamentally this is not a respectful way to treat things. To push the chairs across the floor is very convenient, but it will give us a lazy feeling. When we pick up the chairs one by one carefully, without making much noise, then we will have the feeling of practice in the dining room. So to take his statement, when we lay the knife and fork down and the spoon carefully and the mats, we will get the feeling of practice in the dining room. We will not make much noise, of course, but the feeling is quite different. When we practice this way, we ourselves are Buddha, and we respect ourselves. To take care of the chairs means our practice goes beyond the Zendo. And he talks about his own teacher of many, many years ago, Kishizawa Ian. And he said he did not allow us to put away the amado more than one at a time. And the amado are the wooden doors outside of the shoji screens. And if you go to Inquiry, I think Flint's got a shoji screen behind him. So Suzuki Roshi said one person can push 5 or 6 doors at a time and another person can put them in a box. But Kishizawa Ian told the students to move one door at a time carefully. So, thinking about how we extend practice, I wonder what would be a practice for you to take from your own practice into the world this week. Um, so, an example of a practice that I've been doing is when I go into a supermarket, I remember the meal verses. And the beginning of the meal verse is 72 labours brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us. As we receive this offering, we should consider whether we understand its nature. 72 labours brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us. As we receive this offering, we should consider whether we understand its nature. So already, when I go into a supermarket, I have conceived of it in a particular way, with the potential of respecting each thing I see. And if you think about your hands, which I saw all of them tonight when you bowed, if you think about all the things they've done today, perhaps just look at your hands and with some kindness, all the tasks that you've done from the time you got up to this moment. Those hands have supported you through the day. And I wonder, like me, how much you've remembered and forgotten how to take care of how you use your hands. So in the supermarket, I have something I can occupy my mind with as I go in. But also, as I've been preparing this talk, I've been so curious. I've been experimenting with how I lift the food into the basket when I'm in the supermarket, how I extend my practice so that I take care of the vegetables and whatever I'm buying. How does my hand pick it up and put it in the basket and then take it to the conveyor belt? And then, of course, it depends on the checkout assistant how much respect the food receives as it passes through the, um, the the process that it has to go to get into my bag. So there's something here where maybe we can. It's the particular onlineness we have. It's maybe we need to practice more because we're not able to do it quite so much together. So how can we take ceremony out into our lives? And how can we keep remembering to do this practice? And what are we remembering? The Japanese teacher Shumyo Masuno, who has recently written a book called The Art of Simple Living. And right at the end of the book, he talks about his father, who he said lived to the ripe old age of 87. He said, for several years before his death, he suffered from cancer, but having lived that long, it's almost as if he had died of natural cancer. The day before he passed away, my father spent 3 hours weeding the temple garden. The day he passed away, he rose early as always, tidied his room and did the sweeping. He was simply single-minded about living in the moment. Up until the day he passed away, he devoted himself to tending the garden, and to the utmost of his ability, He tried to carry out the responsibilities he was entrusted with. He taught me, through his example, that the practice continues up to the moment of your death. So I hope this has offered some opportunities to think about the work aspect that Sojin Roshi was talking about, and think about what is your work, and how can you infuse it with practice during the day, and remembering as much as possible, and being kind to yourself when you don't remember. And this week, while I've been practicing for this talk, there's been lots of forgetting. So forgetting is built into the practice. So I'm now going to say the verse on closing the sutra. May the merit of this penetrate into each thing in all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Thank you very much.